So what does it mean if you have some adverse effect upon consuming Lactobacillus reuteri yogurt? Of course, it's not yogurt. I call it yogurt just for simplicity. It's really fermented dairy, but does not meet the criteria for yogurt as set by the FDA. That is, it doesn't have the microbes Lactobacillus bulgaricus and Streptococcus thermophilus. We use other microbes. We're using human-sourced microbes such as Lactobacillus reuteri. But let's say you make the yogurt. The way we do it is, of course, prolonged fermentation with the addition of prebiotic fibers because we're trying to increase the number of microbes dramatically. We typically get something like 300 billion per half cup or 120 milliliter servings. Very high numbers because we want big biological effects. But some people will say, well, I've tried it and I got some kind of sick or adverse effect. So there's two general categories of adverse effect. One is a histamine reaction, and that is, so one of the effects of reuteri is it produces histamine, as do many other microbes. Histamine, think of histamine as a normal signal molecule. It's kind of like insulin. Yeah, you don't want a lot of insulin, but you do need insulin. Without insulin, you die. So without histamine, you would die. It's a necessary signaling molecule. But what's happened in SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, where fecal microbes like E. coli and Salmonella have come to dominate the small intestine where they're not supposed to be. Well, that caused a reduction in histamine processing microbial species. Okay, so let me say that again. So the colonization of the small intestine by unwanted fecal microbes caused a loss or reduction in normal histamine processing microbial species. So when you take reuteri that produces some histamine, normally it can cause reactions like asthma, skin rashes, emotional effects, etc., presumptively due to histamine. The problem is not the reuteri. The problem is the ecosystem of your small intestine is entering in. Remember that everybody's supposed to have reuteri. All wild mammals have reuteri, whether it's a beaver or a moose or a deer. Indigenous hunter-gatherer human populations, unexposed to antibiotics and other factors, all have Lactobacillus reuteri. We're all supposed to have it for all our lives, but virtually everybody in the modern world has lost it. So when you restore reuteri, you can have adverse effects. It's not reuteri's fault. It's a disrupted gastrointestinal microbiome you have. And so the remedy for this is to address the SIBO. The problem is we're using reuteri as part of the solution, right? Either just reuteri itself or as part of the 3-microbe mixture that I call SIBO Yogurt, Lactobacillus reuteri, Lactobacillus gastriae, and Bacillus subtilis, because those are microbes that colonize or germinate in the small intestine and produce bacteria, and it's helping push back those invading fecal microbes. But what if doing this gives you histamine reactions? Well, several ways to deal with this. One way would be to cut back. I've been advocating a half-cup serving per day of the reuteri or of the SIBO yogurt. Cut back maybe to a tablespoon or even a half a tablespoon. And if you tolerate it, build up slowly over weeks and allow those microbes to take root and kill off those invading fecal microbes. If you still have that reaction, you can try a little bit of activated charcoal, like a 1,000 milligram capsule, whenever you get these reactions, and it can often reduce some of the reaction. I don't use some of the other binders of these toxic compounds like bentonite clay because that has lead in it. So I only use activated charcoal, and you use the activated charcoal only on an as-needed basis because it does bind nutrients, keeping you from absorbing nutrients, valuable nutrients. So that's one way to do it. If it's still bothersome, if you're still even taking small quantities of reuteri or SIBO yogurt, still having histamine reactions, then maybe this way is not the best way for you. And we've been reverting back to the herbal antibiotics, the Candibactin AR with Candibactin BR, or the FC-Cytal with Disbiocide, and that has worked quite well. Downside, the advantage of reuteri or SIBO yogurt is not only do they kill off invading fecal microbes, they also begin the process of restoring or rebuilding healthy microbial species. These are the Akkermansias and the Faecalibacterium and Lactospiraceae, Eubacterium hallei, all the beneficial species. The antibiotics don't start that process, but the microbes we use do start that process. So the microbial solutions give you kind of a leg up. They give you a head start on rebuilding a broken microbiome where the antibiotics do not. But if you simply can't tolerate because of the histamine reaction, that's where the herbal antibiotics can be helpful. Of course, those are the two herbal antibiotic regimens that have had some formal validation in a retrospective Johns Hopkins study where they compared those two herbal antibiotic regimens to rifaximin, the standard antibiotic for SIBO, because rifaximin has a track record of success of about 55 to 60%, not that great. And so in this one retrospective study, the herbal antibiotics surprisingly proved superior to rifaximin, and rifaximin failures were successfully addressed by one or the other herbal antibiotic regimen. So that's histamine reactions. Another reaction is die-off. So those who following the conversation know what that means is you introduce something, in this case reuteri or SIBO yogurt, that kills fecal microbes in the small intestine. Well, they release their toxic compounds, and you have a sudden surge in endotoxemia. That is, release of toxic compounds from the death of those microbes into the intestine and then into the bloodstream, endotoxemia. And that can cause all kinds of unpleasant effects: muscle aches, depression, suicidal thoughts, disrupted sleep, nightmare. If you have an existing condition like a skin rash like rosacea or psoriasis, or joint pains like arthritis, it can amplify, it can worsen those conditions transiently, typically no more than a few days, because endotoxemia drives those conditions to a large degree. And so there may be a worsening transiently. Once again, you can back down, just like with histamine reactions, back down the quantity of those yogurts you're taking in. So rather than a half cup, a tablespoon or something like that, and build up gradually over time as you tolerate it. You can also use that activated charcoal, 1,000 milligram capsule, if you get these unpleasant effects. And it's pretty effective, by the way. It takes about 10-15 minutes and you'll get relief. And that will tell you, by the way, that it's likely endotoxemia in the gut that enters the bloodstream. So those are the two most common adverse reactions. Beyond that, what kind of other reactions? Really none to talk about. All the other effects tend to be positive. The improvement in bowel health, improvement in healing of the bowels, increase in major other effects on skin, muscle, brain, emotions, social behavior. And so it's just those two classifications, two categories of adverse effect you can deal with. But if you can manage your way through it, you'll be rewarded with many, many, many health benefits.